Jake stood on stage, trophy in hand, crowd chanting his name. I watched from the shadows, heart pounding, fists clenched. They didn't know what he'd done to Emma or me. I told the truth, and our parents kicked me out. That was 2 months ago. Now more girls are speaking up. And tonight, they'll hear us whether they want to or not. Jake used to call me little punk and shove me into walls when no one looked. Emma would show up with bruises, claiming she fell. Mom said not to start drama. Dad said boys will be boys. I kept a journal, logging every incident. Rebecca, Emma's sister, read it one night by accident. Her eyes widened. She whispered, "We need to talk." That was the first time someone actually believed me. Emma and I sat behind the bleachers once. Her lips split, fingers trembling. "He said if I talk, no one will believe me," she whispered. I gave her my phone and said, "Record him." She stared at me like I handed her a weapon. That night, she caught a voicemail, Jake threatening her. When I played it for Mom, she slapped the phone from my hand. "You're tearing this family apart," she screamed. Emma's voicemail leaked online after someone posted it anonymously. Suddenly, people whispered in hallways. Jake brushed it off, said it was fake. The school principal called me in, voice tight, asking if I had anything to do with it. "Why would I ruin my brother?" I shot back. That night, Jake trashed my bike. Dad watched from the porch and said nothing. Rebecca texted, "We need backup." She had a plan. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Rebecca arranged a meeting with Marcus Coleman, a civil rights attorney who's handled school abuse cases before. He listened jaw tight as we recounted everything: Emma's bruises, Jake's voicemail, the journal. "This isn't just abuse," he said. "This is a cover-up." Mrs. Davidson offered her home for interviews. We called it the safe table. Emma cried when she saw other girls show up: Sarah, Megan, Ashley. One by one, stories spilled. Jake wasn't just a monster, he was protected. And now, we had proof. The school sent an email warning about false accusations damaging student reputations. Jake got louder, cockier, still king of the halls, but then Alex, chin tight and team loyalist, walked into the safe table. I saw him drug Emma's drink. He said, eyes down. The room froze. Rebecca leaned forward. "Are you willing to testify?" He nodded slowly. That night, Lily, my little sister, knocked on Mrs. Davidson's door. I heard what he did. I want to help. The cracks were spreading. The school board meeting packed with parents, reporters, and students. Marcus presented the evidence. Jake sat smugly, arms crossed. When Emma played the voicemail, gasps echoed. I stood, voice shaking, recounting years of violence, and they knew, I said, staring at my parents. The room exploded, some in shock, others in applause. Jake stood to speak. "This is character assassination," he barked. But no one clapped. After the meeting, I waited outside. Jake stormed up, furious. "You ruined me," he growled. I didn't flinch. Rebecca stepped between us. "Touch him and I'll bear you with discovery files." Jake shoved past her, teeth clenched. That night, our parents packed his bags. "We'll fix this," Dad said. But they didn't look at me. I wasn't their son anymore, just the whistleblower who shattered the illusion. Lily cried in my arms, whispering, "Why did they choose him?" I had no answer. That week, I couch-surfed between Mrs. Davidson's and Rebecca's place. Emma's testimony reached the DAR's office. The charges were being discussed. At school, kids avoided me, some out of guilt, some fear. But then Sarah slipped me a note: "Thank you for not giving up." I taped it inside my journal. Jake's friends spread lies, said Emma made it all up for revenge. The school paper ran an anonymous op-ed defending him. I found it in my locker, circled in red ink. That day, Connor Matthews approached me. "They were twisting it all," he muttered. "I have screenshots." My breath caught. He had texts from Jake admitting everything. We finally had something undeniable, proof the town couldn't ignore. Detective Santos took the screenshots seriously. "This shifts everything," she said. An arrest warrant followed. When they cuffed Jake after practice, students filmed it. No cheers, just silence. Our parents weren't there, but Lily was. She held my hand, trembling but proud. The next day, Emma smiled for the first time in weeks. "We did it," she whispered. But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Jake's arrest sparked outrage, just not the kind we expected. A group of parents demanded a review of the school's disciplinary overreach. One even claimed we ruined a promising athlete's future. The superintendent delayed Jake's expulsion. Marcus clenched his jaw. They're doubling down. That night, our group met in silence. Emma typed, "What if it was all for nothing?" But I looked at Lily and replied, "Not if we keep going." Marcus filed a formal complaint with the state board. Media started asking questions about the school, the town, the football program. Rebecca leaked yearbook photos of Jake's coach partying with him. Beers in hand, undeniable bias, she said. Mrs. Davidson handed over decades-old files showing cover-ups. Suddenly, the narrative cracked. News vans parked outside the school. Jake's defenders grew quiet. And the girls, Emma, Sarah, Megan, they were finally heard. Jake's coach resigned. The superintendent was placed on leave. Lily testified anonymously through a written statement, shaking but resolute. Connor published an expose with screenshots and testimonies. The safe table became a movement. Students wore teal ribbons. Still, Jake's attorney pushed for dismissal, claiming emotional manipulation. But Marcus brought in a forensic expert confirming the voicemail's authenticity. Emma sat beside me in court, fingers interlaced with mine. This time, she said, "They'll believe us." At the hearing, Jake's lawyer introduced a fake message claiming it proved Emma's consent. Emma froze. I saw panic in her eyes. But Rebecca stood, demanding it be examined. Within minutes, the tech expert confirmed it was fabricated. Jake's face twisted. The judge warned, "Tampering evidence is a crime." Emma exhaled deeply. I whispered, "He's desperate now." And for the first time, I saw Jake scared. Jake's defense collapsed when Alex testified. He bragged about what he did, said she was asking for it. The courtroom held its breath. Marcus presented his journal entries detailing dates, quotes, and threats. When the doc confirmed more victims had come forward, Jake buried his face in his hands. The judge ordered him into custody pending trial. Rebecca squeezed my shoulder. You cracked the shield, she said. Now he'll face what he ran from. Principal Hayes called me in. You're a disruption, she said. This attention, it's dividing the school. I stood silent, letting her rant. When she threatened suspension, I hit record on my phone. You're protecting an abuser, I said. We'll see how the state board feels about that. Hours later, the clip went viral. Hayes issued a public apology. The silence that followed felt like thunder. And for once, the town couldn't look away. Jake's teammates started coming forward. One revealed a group chat full of threats and slurs. Used to silence girls, another said the coach encouraged toughening up girls who got too vocal. The evidence piled higher. Lily, wearing her teal ribbon, joined us at the safe table. I'm not scared anymore, she said. Emma nodded, pies wet. We weren't just fighting Jake. We were exposing a whole system. And it was finally crumbling. The school tried to cancel prom for safety. Students erupted. A protest formed on the football field, girls in dresses, boys in ribbons. Rebecca handed out flyers. Safety means accountability. I grabbed the mic. They're scared of our voices, not our actions. The crowd roared. That night, the district reversed the cancellation. Mrs. Davidson baked cupcakes in celebration. You're all leading something bigger than this town, she said. And for once I believed her. At prom, Emma wore teal sequins. I wore my journal in my blazer pocket. When we danced, kids clapped not for romance but for resistance. The GD played our protest anthem. Rebecca cried. Lily stood on stage, thanking the brave ones who refused to stay silent. Even the mayor showed up, awkwardly applauding. Marcus leaned in. This is your moment. I looked around, realizing this was more than survival. It was justice in motion. A local podcast featured our story. Emma, Sarah, and I recorded late at night in Rebecca's kitchen. We didn't just recount events, we named names. Told truths. What would you say to someone scared to speak up? The host asked. Emma said, find your table. Fill it with people who won't flinch. That line caught fire online. Safe table trended. Even strangers started sending messages. You gave us a voice. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement. Jake's lawyer tried another tactic, smearing Emma's mental health. They dug up old therapy visits, painted her as unstable. Marcus pushed back hard. Victims seeking help isn't a weakness, it's courage. The judge agreed, calling the argument irrelevant and prejudicial. Emma cried in the hallway. I sat beside her. They can't erase what you lived, I said. She nodded slowly. They can try, but I'm still here. Her strength made me sit straighter. Lily was called to testify again. She stood small but fierce, reading her words in front of a courtroom packed with adults. I used to think love meant silence. Now I know it means standing up. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. The room was silent. Even the bailiff blinked back tears. Afterward, I hugged her so tight she gasped. You did more than enough, I whispered. You reminded them all what truth sounds like. A reporter asked me, what would you tell Jake now? I didn't hesitate. Nothing. This was never about him. It's about everyone he hurt and everyone who let it happen. That quote hit the front page. Principal Hayes retired quietly. Jake's mom stopped coming to court. Dad left a voicemail I deleted without listening. I didn't need their approval anymore. We had each other. And that was finally enough. Jake tried one last move, blaming Emma. He claimed she initiated everything. But then Ashley took the stand. Calm, clear. She described Jake's threats, the bruises, the fear. Emma saved me, she said. She gave me the courage to leave. Jake's face turned pale. The jury leaned forward. Marcus whispered. That sealed it. Outside, students held signs, we believe survivors. For the first time, justice didn't feel distant. It felt possible. The jury reached a verdict, guilty on all counts. Jake didn't look at anyone as he was led away. Emma clutched my hand, trembling. Marcus exhaled like he's been holding his breath for months. Outside, the crowd erupted. Rebecca hugged Lily. You were the bravest of us all. News anchors called it a landmark case. But to us, it was just survival turned into power, and a truth no one could bury again. A scholarship came in, an anonymous donor supporting advocates for change. It had my name on it. I found out later it was Mrs. Davidson. Your voice matters, she said. Emma got accepted into a women's advocacy program. Lily started a podcast for survivors. Rebecca opened a safe table chapter in another school. The ripples kept spreading. What began with a journal and a whisper had become a movement with no end in sight. At graduation, I stood in line, cap tilted, journal tucked beneath my gown. They called my name. Applause thundered. Not polite, fierce. Emma whistled. Rebecca stood with a handmade banner, Truth Tellers Graduate 2. I locked eyes with Lily. She mouthed, we did it. And in that moment, under flashing cameras and streaming banners, I knew something had changed. We weren't shadows anymore. We were the ones people now listen to. Sometimes I still hear Jake's voice in my head mocking, cruel, but now it's just an echo. My real voice is louder. When I write in my journal, I see how far we've come. Not just me, Emma, Lily, all of us. We broke something open. And even if healing takes time, we're not alone. Every ribbon, every whisper thank you says it. We weren't crazy. We were right. That changes everything. Emma asked once, would you do it again? I didn't hesitate. Yes, even knowing what we'd lose. She smiled, bittersweet, because we found more. And she was right. We lost a family that never protected us but gained one that did. Mrs. Davidson's kitchen became our safe haven. Lily's laugh, Rebecca's stubborn hope, it all built something stronger than fear. What we built can't be broken, not anymore. There's a mural now outside the school. It shows teal waves crashing through stone walls. Below it, the words "You're not alone." Students add ribbons every week. I visit sometimes, run my fingers across the paint. I think of all we survived, all we changed. The girl who reads that wall tomorrow might feel what we felt, and maybe she'll speak. That's how we keep this alive. By never going quiet again. Jake was sentenced to 10 years without parole. The courtroom didn't cheer, it just breathed. Emma held my hand the whole time. Outside, the news called it justice. I just called it done. He couldn't hurt anyone else, not while we stood watch. Our town will forget headlines but not what came after. Because the system shifted, it saw us, and for once, it chose to believe. That matters more than revenge. Mrs. Davidson started a support network, monthly gatherings called Safe Table Circles. Survivors shared, healed, and built each other up. I hosted the first youth night. We played music, painted protest signs, laughed till midnight. Emma read a poem. Lily passed out teal wristbands. For strength, she said. We don't need a banner or a protest that day, just community. That quiet power felt louder than any scream we'd ever shouted. I opened my journal again, same one from the start. Flipped to the first page. Nobody will believe me. I crossed it out. Wrote they did, underlined it twice. Then I handed the journal to a girl who walked into the safe table crying. You write now? I said. We believe you. Her hands shook but she nodded, and just like that the cycle broke again, one truth at a time.